Thank you for coming, for attending this Dharma talk. Thank you for all of your help in supporting this community, both by attending, by practicing, and by financially supporting us. We need your help. Please continue if you can. The topic for tonight's Dharma talk is something I have not talked on in a retreat situation or in a Dharma talk that I know of. Maybe I've alluded to it, but I wanted to say something about different kinds of retreat practice. The one I want to talk about this evening is called a strict solitary retreat. This does not come from the Zen, Soto Zen tradition. This comes from the Chogyam tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, where I learned that at. Some of the things I learned studying with Trungpa Rinpoche, I don't particularly use or teach. And some of the things I learned from him, I do teach. And this is one of them, strict solitary retreat. And I also teach some other practices, creation completion practice, or sometimes referred to as deity yoga, some of that. But I do it situationally. A solitary retreat, strict solitary retreat, just means it's strict. It's a tight form, but it has a few loose ends there. One, the basic structure is starts out with 10 days. And you have a day that you prepare to go in. Then you go in, and this retreat starts at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you sit from 8 o'clock until noon, which is I refer to as a block sit. And then you take a couple hours off for lunch and maybe a little reading, maybe for a walk, depending on where you're in retreat at. And come back, and then another sit from 2 to 4, and then a couple, 3 hours off, and then for evening meal and more reading possibly, or maybe a little walking around, maybe some exercise, and then go back to sitting from 7 o'clock until 9. Go to sleep, get up at 6 o'clock, repeat, do the same thing over again, unless you receive instructions from the teacher, in this case, this person, about something you might do differently in that retreat. But that's the basic form that I first did that form under the instruction of Trungpa Rinpoche in 1974. And today is the anniversary, this 47th anniversary of the first month-long solitary retreat that I did, strict solitary retreat, about 12 miles north of here in Berry County, back in the woods in a cabin that I built for that purpose 47 years ago in 1977. So it seems to be necessary not only to do sitting meditation in a daily practice, whether that may be 15, 20 minutes, maybe that's all you need to do, maybe a half an hour, maybe an hour. If you ask me, my recommendation is around an hour a day. You can. And if your job situation lets you do that, your family situation, your other obligations in your society and so on, allow you to have that room to do that, then do that. And sit as simply as possible. I don't recommend shamatha vipassana or mindfulness awareness practice other than situation. Some situations, that's what I would teach, but it's with that particular person. The general teaching that I encourage and start at is a shikantaza. Sit down, hold still, all the senses are open, in particular the eyes. Sit in front of something where nothing is moving. It can be outside in your backyard in front of a tree. It can be your closet door. It can be the wall space next to your altar if you have one. Sit down, hold still, and watch what moves. Observe the movement of the mind stream. And to do this in strict solitary retreat, strict meaning you don't see anybody, you don't go anywhere, you don't take your phone in with you unless you have a special situation where you need it, and no entertainment unless you call a Dharma book entertainment. And that would be something that we would talk about. You may have a book you had in mind. It's your first retreat then that you've ever done, and I probably would tell you what I would like you to read. The prior of the monastery, the Sukansu, Chiezan, is in his, I think, third day of a 10-day solitary retreat. And he's done many retreats, 10 days, 2 weeks, 20 days. I think he's done 30 days at some point in the past. And strict solitary. That doesn't mean that if with an arrangement of talking with the particular individual, it's very situational. So we set up a forum, but then it might shift depending on who it is that's going into retreat, what they're dealing with, what time of the year it is, and whether they're upstairs in the studio apartment we call Milrepa. That's where people have been doing retreats in there, right just above the Zendo for how many years? I don't know how many. You have any idea when we started doing that? 10, 12 years ago?
Easily.
So, and Chogyam, which is the one out in the woods out where Munyo and I live about 10 miles from here in the country on 10 acres of basically woods. A lot of it is woods now. And there's a cabin built there that's pretty small. What size is it?
8 by 16.
8 by 16. So about enough room to stretch out for you. And so, but have done, I don't know how many retreats have happened that we've never kept a record of it, but quite a few. So he's out there now. He will come out week from tomorrow, I think. So the idea there is to give you a chance to really emphasize being alone, observing a form by following it, follow those instructions, and then also notice, perhaps because it's an awareness practice, not an achievement practice, to notice how you might not be able to do that. I've actually had people go into retreat that, not very many, but occasionally, and I'm not going to name this person, but just to give you an example, who spent half the retreat playing video games. Is that incorrect? No, the conventional way of teaching, the conventional way of learning, the conventional way of doing any damn thing is about gaining ideas. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in your awareness practice. That, what I'm saying here, doesn't give you permission to go into retreat and just waste your time doing something else. And was he wasting his time? Or was it she? No, it was a he. And no, it was not. That is an understanding of how that particular person's mind works. They wanted to do the forms. They tried to do the forms. They eventually did settle down and do the forms, but not before spending a few days goofing around on their, probably on their phone. I can't remember. And so I do things situationally. Usually would tell somebody not to take their phone in, but if they said they needed the phone, I would trust them. We're all adults here. But now I don't, because I had somebody who took their phone in and was tempted by it. And so now now we don't allow phones to go into retreat. They stay in our house. And even that, if there was a situation where someone needed to receive a call, then we would look at that situationally, not make a hard, fast form that everybody has to toe the line to. Not a good idea to do that in our society, in our culture, and with the people that are students in this particular monastery. You might need to go through that kind of a passage. You may need to do that. So nothing to correct, but there's a hell of a lot to see and observe. Find out. You're not going to find out who this is. I'm pointing at you at the same time I'm pointing at myself. You're not going to find out who you are if you continue to cover it up with ideas, judgments, preferences, evaluations. Self-evaluation is not a good idea. This is not therapy. It's not better than therapy. It's just different. Some people really need therapy, need a lot of it. And they're really not ready to do this, not because this is so terribly advanced. It's different. And how is it different? I'm happy to respond to questions about that, but I can tell you two things right away. Spiritual path is about transcending this world without leaving it. Well, of course, you're going to die, but to actually see that you are not. This is unreal. This is an illusion. Not something you believe in. It's something you realize yourself so that you know this is an illusion. You don't need me to tell you that. You have realized it yourself. The mundane path, which is just as valid and a lot more substantial in terms of results or practices is any number of things: getting a degree, working really hard, learning a particular trade or a particular technology, something like that. Very important. We all need to do some of that. We're going to support ourselves in this illusion that looks so damn solid. But you can do both. You can actually work in this world, generate a livelihood. And I'm hoping, insofar as I hope any damn thing, that we can do this with this monastery, which is a new thing in this culture. It's a new thing in Buddhism altogether. A monastery where men and women are both ordained as monks. We don't have nuns here. It's an equal situation as far as we can do that with the interference of the culture, not only out there, but in your mind stream, your own cultural beliefs that are lodged in there. So the idea here is to do both, to do cultural situation, having a job, having a career, getting married, having children. We already have several children right here in this community that are children of people who are monastery residents. So it's unusual. Easy? No, it's challenging to do that. It's challenging to do it with relationships, because that's one of the reasons in ancient times they had the whole celibacy thing going on, because it's so difficult if you have intimate relationships with others, same sex or other sex. Strict solitary retreat is recommended. No one is ordered to do that. Even somebody who's fully ordained as a monk, as long as they're doing a lot of sitting on their own with their job situation, with their family consideration, then I wouldn't make them do a solitary retreat. But usually people ask about that eventually and want to do that. Some people want to just go into retreat and stay there. Life sucks that much. I see 3-4 smiles. I don't know how many people are smiling out there, but it looks like a few people. But it's difficult. Life is hard. It's very hard. So you can either cover it up with ideas, activity. You can go fly fishing. You can go to go play bingo or play cards or spend a lot of time in your garden. I mean, it's just all kinds of distractions that from the point of view of what they are, they're fun, or they're entertaining, they're valuable. Having a garden, having hobbies, sewing, crafts, painting, all of that, plus just having a real strong interest in whatever your career, your job is. Those are all valid and should be addressed. And it's individual. It's very situational. Not everybody needs to come to a monastery and live here, but the ones who need to come here, I think they're here. And people are free to leave if they want to. It's not a prison, nor is it a cult. If I can help it, I don't want it to be one. It might look like one to some people. So strict solitary retreat. If someone wanted to sit for 3 or 4 days in a row, they could do that too, but it would not be what I would call, or my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, would call a strict solitary retreat. It would just be 3 or 4 days of sitting all day. They have come up with another approach, another form that some people are able to use that are not able to just leave their whole job situation or relationship situation or child situation and just go into the woods for 10 days or 2 weeks or a month. And that's called what I call a 4x4. And so all know, some of you know anyway, about block sitting. I recommend 4 hour, 8 in the morning till noon. Sit there, sit down, strike a bell, sit there for 4 hours. And also, but don't maintain it. The intention is to sit, and 4 hours later, ring the bell again if you're sitting by yourself. And what you do in that time is your awareness practice, even if it's getting up and going to the kitchen or sitting on the back porch and smoking a cigar. No matter what you're doing, it's the awareness of what you're doing, not that it's right or it's wrong. Same thing with the person I mentioned that ended up going to a retreat and playing video games. That was not a mistake. That was just something that person needed to be in that situation and seeing how they were going to it was choiceless, you could say. They just didn't want to be there, didn't like being all by himself in the woods with nothing to do but follow the instructions of the teacher, which is sit down, hold still, and watch what moves. No, this person ended up going in circles and filling up their time with video games, but not for the whole thing. They eventually, after a few days, started to actually practice the form. I don't know what it's like to be that person, nor do I know what it's like to be you. But the idea here, as a Dharma teacher, I want to relate to you as directly as I can. I'm not like either one of my teachers. I'm nothing at all like Kobun. I'm nothing at all like Trungpa Rinpoche. But they help me see who this is so that I can teach out of how I see this. Without them, I could not do this. I would still be concerned about what you thought of me. I'm no longer concerned about what you think of me, although I'm pretty aware of it. But I'm not concerned about it because not as there there's no one here, but there's no one over there. So if you have credentials for anything, you're creating it yourself. That's usually a pack of lies. Good luck with that. Strict solitary retreat. Then you go in and you sit there 8 hours a day. It's broken up different ways, usually 4, 2, and 2. But it could be a little different. Maybe. If it's your first retreat, then I would prefer and would recommend that you just stick with the form and don't shift it around. Someone who's done lots of retreats, then we talk about modifying that. Maybe they might do 10 hours a day instead of 8. Several people want to do more, and we do that. We talk about the form ahead of time, so they're kind of, not that they're getting my permission, but I'm included in it, so I can help them with that if they need be. Because sometimes you can be in retreat and things can really come apart, as they say, big time, and you're not able to continue. That has happened. Not often, but it does happen. Very difficult to look at the mind stream without any tools other than the awareness. Very difficult, very challenging, because the ego does not want to be discovered, and he, she, they will fight tooth and nail, as the saying goes, to prevent that awareness from exposing the truth of what? There is no self. There's no solid person. That is invented. So the 4x4, what I should have talked about earlier, would be 4 hours in the morning, 2 hours off or whatever for lunch, and then 4 hours in the afternoon, and then do those 4 days in a row. And then that way, if you wanted to, you could stay right in the hut, retreat hut, the Chogyam, or you could stay, if it was in Mellerup upstairs, you could stay there for 8 hours total, 8, 9, 10 hour total, and then you could go home at night. So that's another way of working with it. So people who can't stay out there the entire thing. That way you could maybe take in your lunch, but you would come home after the full 10 hours was over with. It's another way of doing it. And then if someone came this way and wanted to do a retreat and had a different idea about how to lay it out, I would certainly consider it. So the value of doing this by yourself is quite often, if we're interacting with others, talking with others, watching television, listening to the neighbors, engage in all kinds of chatter going on with ourselves and with those in our family and our relationships, our children, mom and dad, etc., and Sangha members, all of this comings and going, the busyness. This is just a way to get right. It's right away from it altogether. It's like what we have with COVID, social distancing. Only this it's a very similar thing. This is what monks do. They go away for a while, but do what? Just look at the mind. This is still going on in China, even though those practices go back thousands of years in the mountains. The mountains there aren't just steep slopes. They go up like this and like that. Pretty hard to even climb them. So hard to find somebody if they're 2,000 feet in the air. So questions about that, or anything actually, but questions about strict sitting meditation, strict solitary retreat. Go ahead, sir.
Shoulder bowing. I'm wondering if you could speak to, or it's not a clear question, but the balance between receiving instructions from a teacher and giving our input on how we want a form to look. Bowing.
So it would, you've done several retreats. You just finished a 30-day solitary retreat. So your question is coming out of having quite a bit of experience with retreats. I'd say there's quite a bit of experience. And I would say it depends on the individual person. If someone comes to me, no one's going to go into retreat here unless they talk to me first. And while they're in retreat, they might not be a committed student to me. I would have to talk to them first I don't want people going to the retreat here that don't see me as their teacher, or as at least as a teacher, for at least for the time they're in retreat. And so it depends on what tradition they're coming from. There's so much input these days. This organization started out as a SokukoJi Buddhist community because I felt we didn't have to just be Sokuzan, we didn't have to just be the Kagyu tradition, we didn't have to just be Shambhala, but this we could, anyone who's practicing Buddhism, we could all do this together. I found out that the politics of experience, the politics of the individuals that came in this, they were just warfare. People did not want me to be in charge of anything. At least that's how it looked. Does that how it looked to you at the time? When you was there at that time. And so the people that were coming from a Kagyu tradition and from another, I would say, Zen tradition, they just went different directions. And so not wrong. It just wasn't time to do that by bringing existing approaches or other ideas about it. They weren't ready to be students of mine. Well, it's taking quite a while. So coming back to your question, I would just say it's very situational. Did I get close to what you're asking about? Or is there something specific?
It brings up sometimes people might reach out as a retreatant and they don't particularly participate, or we don't see them on Zoom in our forums, and they might look to go straight into a solitary. And I think most of the time you instead rather than come for a practice residency. And
yes.
I'm wondering, what are you looking for to see that someone's ready to go into a solitary in that situation?
Just see that they have some, you can't just go from sitting 20 minutes a day or an hour a day and go into a 10-day solitary retreat without talking to somebody who has a lot of experience there. I went, my first solitary retreat was, I was put in there by Trungpa Rinpoche, and I didn't ask for it. He put me in the retreat, talked to me for a few minutes, and acted as if I had asked him. I think I've told that story before. I didn't ask him about going to retreat. He says, well, I guess you can go into retreat. Like, I didn't ask him that at all. And then he proceeded to give me instructions. Don't eat anything that you're not used to eating. Don't change your habits in that way. Don't sit more than 8 hours a day, like I was going to do that. Don't sit more than 8 hours a day. Well, that's exactly what I did. I sat 8 hours a day. And yeah, it was pretty astonishing to me. But he talked to me and asked me questions. I won't go into all of that, but asked me questions about it. So he had a pretty good idea of who he was talking to, and he could see that I had a really strong commitment to him. So if someone comes here and wants to just play around with this, then probably not going to happen. We need to have a strong commitment to the teacher here, which in this case is this person. That being said, if they were willing to come here and just do 10 days or 3 days or something, I have a practice residency, get an idea of what this community is like, I have an interview with me and kind of tune in that way, then there's a possibility that we could schedule a retreat for them. But Sangha is very important, and quite often the people who want to do a solitary retreat are idealistic about it and think that it will help them get away, or they'll have some kind of a great breakthrough. You've been in retreats enough to know there's no breakthrough there. There's something else. You have to care to comment what it is. Put it in words. Can you do that?
Contrast.
It's a pretty good word. Contrast between what and what?
For my next question was in that area of
Go ahead.
how I respond to personally my personal practice in a tight container like that, and outside of a tight container like that.
And
I had a question
go ahead.
on Shoto bowing. I seem to respond in such a way when I have a really crisp container like that, where I can actually sit a lot of hours, and then when I'm out, I don't function in that way.
Yes.
Is there do you recommend trying to find ways to tighten up outside of a solitary retreat to get more hours on the cushion?
No, I don't. That's why we have the retreat, so you can go in and see what that's like for you. It might not show up that way for anyone else here, but that's your description of it. You already are a fully ordained monk. You already live in a monastery. We already work your butt off doing everything from plumbing to, what is that other thing? They have walking dogs or something like that. You do that too? You walk dogs?
If you know me to,
yeah,
probably.
probably would. So I guess you're the only dog walker.
Son bowing.
Go ahead.
I have wondered about what a retreat would look like, given that I don't get time off from work particularly. Do you have teaching around either regular block sits before or after work or weekend retreats? Son bowing.
So you could do a block sitting. That's something you and I could talk about at some point if you want to find a way to strengthen that. In your situation, you could do a solitary retreat. You could do a 10-day if you, depending on your work situation, of course. You could do that right where you're at, right in your studio apartment, 20 Vines. It would be possible. Shoka has done a retreat in that particular studio apartment a couple of years ago. So it can be done in that particular one. We'd have to move some things around, but not so much. And the other thing is, if you wanted to do some block sets, you could set it up so we can do a 4x4. So that means 4 in the morning, 4 hours, 4 in the afternoon, and then the next day 4 and 4, and then the next day 4 and 4, and the next day 4 and 4. So that's a strong form. There's 4 days of 4 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. That's a 4x4. It's just a form. We could move it. We could make it only 3 days of that if it suited your particular work situation, your social situation, and so on. Does that get close to what you're looking for?
Son bowing. It does, and I think the 4x4, maybe even for more days, would be workable. So I'll talk to you more about that on Saturday. Thank you. Son bowing.
Yes, sir. We can do, going where it looks like you're going. We can do 4x6. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, and 4, 4. Did I get it right? Did that add up to 6?
One more.
Enough of you. You're counting. Was it more? Did you want to do 5? Did I only do 5?
I thought it was 6. But I wasn't counting.
I'm going with what she said. 6. So to take it, not to be too silly, but just you could set that up. You could do that for 10 days if you wanted to. That, I mean, if you have a way of doing that, set up that, and there are different ways of doing it. We'll adjust that. The idea is to get a lot of sitting in. We'll adjust that to suit the situation. I think Junchu is getting ready to do something. Is that this weekend or
Next weekend.
next weekend? So, and that's 4 days in a row. Okay, 4x4. So, and that way you get in a lot of practice, but you don't get detached, disconnected from things you really need to take care of: your business, your relationship situation, your social structure, the sangha obligation you have, and everywhere, including jobs and family and so on. Yes, sir.
Chogyam Bowing. What's the significance of the 10 days, or how does that length of time?
Why is it 10 days? My understanding back when I wondered why it wasn't a week is because we're all used to a week. Things take a week, and 10 days is much harder than a week because you actually know a week is over with, but you're not done yet. So it's like that. There's a kind of a social structure of, Sunday to Sunday or something like that. Something about that. I think that's what it cuts into, the 10-day situation. And also, it's somewhat arbitrary, but it certainly is harder to do 10 days than it is a week. Quite a bit harder for some reason. We can also do the 4x4 and come back to, so I don't know if that covers totally what you're looking for there, but it's really as simple as that.
Is the I mean, you said it's harder and that's part of it.
Yes.
So what is it about it being harder?
I think the thing is that we don't realize how attached we are to something being a week long. And so if you go in and do 10 is an even number in some ways, but in another way, it's kind of an odd number because you can't really you can't just say, well, if you went into retreat today, what day would you get out? 10 days. You went in tonight. Yeah. But if it was a week, you would know exactly when you're going to get out, and that would stick in your mind stream. Whereas this other way, it's kind of an odd area, like Chogyam, the other Zan person, entered retreat a Sunday night. And so if he's in there for 10 full days and he comes out the morning after the 10th day, what day does he come out? Anyone tell me right away? So it's harder to keep track of that odd number because we're so used to that week being a week. But it's 3 days more than that. So do you know what day it is? You? Thursday, right?
Yeah, a week from tomorrow when Rumi graduates.
Yeah, Rumi graduates. Rumi's at high school?
No, preschool.
Oh, that's why he got a haircut.
22nd.
Getting ready for his graduation.
It's our 23rd.
23rd. Yes, sir.
So bowing. I feel on a few occasions you've used the idea that the training and retreat goes under the radar of ego. Is there anything you can say about what's happening in retreat that we don't necessarily notice?
Well, I can't because you can't notice it. That's why it's so important to do it. The what happens in the awareness is below the radar of any kind of relative knowledge, ego, and all of that other baloney. It's not that we don't need relative knowledge to pick this up and put it down or to know when to water the ikebana, but it's not that we don't need that. But when we try to use that in terms of understanding our mind stream, even there, we can do some of it. We have really famous examples of people who are extremely adept at using relative structures, logic, analysis, and so on, like Vasubandhu, Nagarjuna, Dogen Zenji, people who are able to take what they were looking at and bring it out of that deep perception, understanding what this was, into a construct that could be studied, and we could learn to move our thinking process toward a fundamental understanding, which transcends all the concepts. If you realize this, you will not know it because there's no one left to know it. It's that simple and it's that bizarre. It's just bizarre to think that you would realize something beyond your individuality of the self-centeredness, the ego of what you've grown up thinking you're this person. You think this person, and then you have these ideas about who you are, and what you can do, and what you can't do, and all these interpretations. That's what you take into retreat. A strict solitary retreat means strict. You go in there and you sit down and you do that form. You follow the form that your teacher gives you. And no matter what happens, you don't make alternations. But if you do some of that in there, then that's also part of the awareness practice. That may be something you may need to go through in retreat. But what needs to happen will not happen in the area of where the thinking process, the identity has set up housekeeping. It's not in the basement. It's not in the attic of that particular structure called me. You can't find it. It's not even out in the yard. You cannot. It's without location. Therefore, it's everywhere. Have no location. Location in time or space is unreal. And I can sit here and hammer at you all day and just shout and hit the tabletop, which I often do. Unreal. That's unreal. This is how you know it's unreal. It's not wispy like incense smoke. It's solid like granite or like a wooden table. It's solid. It's that kind of an illusion. You can see what this is. You can see through this the illusion of a separate being that's come out of consciousness only down into birth, and will go back into death at some point, either 3 weeks after they're born or 90 years after they're born. Go ahead. I dare you. I dare you. Did you have another question?
I was just going to say thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
shoulder bowing, it can feel good to get out of retreat, and then that usually comes crashing down.
You notice that.
Is there some kind of grasping that we do when we get towards the end of retreat or when we come out of it that?
Yeah, yes, of course you grasp. Otherwise you wouldn't crash. Because the location you would not be looking for something, gaining something, keeping something, holding on to something. That's why I don't teach, don't maintain anything. Sit down and watch what moves. Don't maintain awareness. That's a different kind of teaching. And it's a valid teaching for those who are teaching it, to those who need that teaching. But if you're listening to me, then you need to hear what I'm saying to you. Don't maintain shit. You don't need to do that. You can just watch this way you actually see what moves far beyond your own personal wishes or hopes or fears beyond the movement. You actually start to see incredible activity of illusion, which is called dependent origination. This seems to cause that, and then that happens, and this turns this way, and then this shows up this way. You get to see the entire scenario, front stage, backstage, out in the hallway, out on the street, on top of the theater, which is your mind. Everywhere, you see it everywhere. And it's devastating to ego. Ego has a hard time with that. Yes.
Bowing. How is a strict solitary retreat different from something like our Ongo bowing?
Well, with the Ongo, you have company come in, and you look at the screen, so there's Chisho looking at his mountain, and looking out the window, we can see his shoulder there, right, Chisho? So, or you see someone else who seems to be, or you notice that someone is their altar is there, but they're never there. So it's like they want to participate, but they really have other stuff to do. So you get to sit with their altar because they're not sitting next to it. Ango. That being said, people come in here just like our friend Nathan. I keep going, wanting to call him Kevin. He's a Nathan. He's not a Kevin. Our friend, what's his name?
Nathan,
What's his last name?
I don't remember. He's the pig dad.
He's a big guy.
Pigs. He has great
He's a
pigs.
big guy. Yeah, he has pigs. Very good pigs. Very sweet, kind pigs. So he, even though he was he's not a member, he's not a resident. He came here for 2 months, and that first month, I was in here quite a bit myself, and I don't think I saw time when he wasn't sitting over there facing that wall. But if he took off, we came right back. He sat there the entire time. I'm not saying other people didn't sit a lot too, but I thought it stood out to me that someone who'd never been here before was able to come in and sit. And so the value of that, I think he benefited. No, he didn't talk about it, had an interview, but didn't talk about it so much, other than he really appreciated being here. And I would kind of assume that it's needing a community to sit with, to be able to sit like that. He had also sat at, I think, at Tassajara and one other monastery other than that. So he wasn't new to monasteries. More? Yes.
Unyabao, you said a few minutes ago, if you realize this, you won't know it.
Yes.
But I believe you also teach that there is a knowing that goes beyond. And I liken that to unconditional confidence. So what is the knowing
Yes.
that is unconditional confidence?
You won't know it. There's no one left there, because the actual realization, the description of that realization is to see that there's a solid being here, but it's not a separate person. It's not separate from anyone else. Separated, but the fingers are separated. These are not the same finger, but they're on the same hand. These are not the same hands, but they're on the same body. That carries on and on and on into separation that is fundamentally not separate. And that is, you begin to realize that everywhere you look, you don't see yourself here and your enemies and friends and neutral people over there. Everybody is not separate from you, and you actually realize it. The consciousness realizes it, not an individual ego or set of hopes and fears and prejudices. Well, good area to ask questions in if you have it.
Divine, I think I've asked you this before. It just feels like consciousness is playing a big joke on us. Does
Mm.
consciousness create forms just to test us?
Yeah, it can seem like a joke as long as there's somebody there. It can seem like you're being tricked by something. That's why teachers sometimes operate that way. There's all kinds of examples down through history of teachers who are outrageous for their students. I'm not saying that always is the case, but sometimes the teacher functions in such a way to be very irritating or frightening or just outrageous in terms of teaching that person. Lots of examples. You've heard lots of them yourself. What's your favorite one?
You. Not you.
Everybody's shrugging. You said that. That's the SokukoJi mudra. Yes. Yes.
Why would we ask to go into a solitary retreat? What would show up in our practice or
I
event?
don't know. I wouldn't do it. Too hard. I'll do it. What is it you want to know? You know what I'm saying.
What is it in our practice where it would be beneficial or we should be asking for
When's the last solitary retreat you did?
October 15th to November 15th?
Okay. So that was a 30-day retreat. And you just recently asked to do another one. So I would ask you, why would you want to do that?
Have intensive practice.
Not to get away from me? No. Get away from the community? Go hide out somewhere in a cabin? You know what I'm asking you. No, you do. Give me some responses that show me you have a sense of humor around this.
To get away from accounting, I would go into retreat.
You just got through taking account of me a few minutes ago, and now you're wanting to get away from accounting. Didn't you correct me?
I offered an answer to your question.
Okay, I'll stop. Yes.
So grandbowing in a solitary situation, what are we bringing or what is the support that we would look for in a retreat setting?
What is the support? Just being alone. You're with people. You're with your situation. You're with all of us. You have a function here in the monastery as a shuso, and you're the shuso, right? Okay. So, and you did have work when you were as a doing Chinese medicine, acupuncture. You're doing 1 day a week right now of that. So you've got that plus the shuso responsibilities, which are quite a bit. And if you were to go into retreat, all that would be set aside. Someone else would take on whatever that was, and so as they're able, and then you would have nothing to do but just sit there and just watch your mind come and go. So that's the practice that we're talking about here is an awareness practice, strengthening, prioritizing that awareness practice, not so much what arises in the awareness, but the awareness itself. Did I get anywhere near what you're asking about?
So grandbowing when we're in retreat
Yes.
and we're alone, what is the support that we find in retreat?
3 jewels: return to the teacher, return to the teaching, return to the Sangha.
So grandbowing, the teacher isn't there with us, the Sangha isn't there with us, the teaching is still in our mind, but it not necessarily. So how does that
I'd have to do it. This is one of the reasons we, even in this, not only the Kagyu tradition, but the Zen tradition is prosperous. To use your body to do something, to do that chant a sutra. I don't have a set thing that you need to practice. I talk to each person, and some people are doing more sutra practice or chanting practice. Some people are not. Some people are working on sadhana mahamudra, that particular practice. Other people are just doing shikantaza alone. So right now, Chiezan is doing Shikantaza and Guru Yoga, a form of Guru Yoga. But that doesn't mean anyone else is going to do that necessarily. Just like you've asked me for a practice that will help you in this way, even before you're asking this question. Isn't that true? Have I gotten back to you with that yet? I've not forgotten it. That's how I'm able to say something about it right now.
So group bowing is support something that we create, that is created in our own mind.
To some extent, the important thing that is difficult to teach directly, but is very important is devotion. Devotion to the teacher, devotion to the Dharma, whatever part of the Dharma has a powerful, strong meaning for you. Everything is dependently risen. Nothing comes from its own side as an individual being. Life is suffering. The cause is wanting something else. This can come to an end. How does it come to an end? Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. So remembering those, returning to that structure or a structure, maybe the 12 links that you would have to study or remind yourself of or say, or the 4 reminders, which were covered a little bit in the monk talks with Nyoka, his talk. And then, yes, go ahead.
So group bowing, when someone contacts us and is wanting to go into retreat or coming to visit, I feel excited. Is that self-centered somehow?
I don't think it's self-centered. This is something that's very valuable to you. You wouldn't be here. It's very valuable to you, and you have done this enough for many, many years. What, 20-some years? You've been practicing awareness practice, so you have a good idea of what you're up to, and you realize how difficult it is and how long it takes. And when someone comes and wants to check into this, you realize maybe you're not out of the woods yourself, so to speak, or maybe you are, but you realize how valuable this is and how rare it is for someone to connect with a teaching like this. So I get excited too if I know someone's going to come. I'm always very happy to see someone here brand new I've never met before, or someone on the screen that I've never met before, because I know that I'm certain. I don't need any proof. I am certain that anybody who hears, not because I'm such a great guy, but because I've stumbled into something that I can see, that took me decades to see, that I'm able to say a few words about and encourage you. I can encourage you without proof. I will not promise you anything. But if you give me permission to function as your teacher, I will be right on your ass about your practice and how that shows up for you, or how it shows up for Biyun, or how it shows up for Shanjian. Is going to be a different structure altogether, because when I look away from you and I look at him or her, it's a different chemistry, a different way of protecting the ego from seeing the truth of that nothing is separate from anything. And so the ego is in danger, and we look to protect that. And so go ahead. So I would get interested in seeing that maybe this, I sometimes say to people who are setting up teaching situations, there you are. I wondered where you were, Miyoko. Setting up situations where different people are coming and going, and I say, I want to get in front of as many people as possible without doing something outrageous, but because I always feel there's a possibility somebody may need to hear the Dharma presented in the way that I do it, because I don't do it like either one of my teachers, nor do I do it like any other teachers that I know of. And not that there isn't somebody that's doing it this way, because I'm doing it out of what I'm looking at, not what I've been taught. More? Which one of you wants to go first? Okay.
Biyun bowing. When I sit and practice, is that practice mine?
Is it mine?
Is it mine?
Sure. Yes, it's yours, but not the identity part. The identity part is going to be there for a while, kind of keeping tabs and and noticing how much you practice and what you haven't practiced. That'll happen for a while, but eventually the identity, the unreal, the false identity of a self that can win or lose, live or die, or have success or failure begins to be seen through, becomes transparent. Or I sometimes use my own personal image as like my ego self is like a clown. And so it doesn't have to leave because it's unreal, it's invented. It's not all that funny either. Yes.
Using mind. Is there a quality of ignorance of turning away from our world and going into a solitary retreat?
Yes, there's a quality of ignorance if I go like this. If I look at, you can't get away from passion, aggression, and ignorance. But it's yes, there's something to, you're turning away, but it's a stylized kind of turning. You're doing it as it shows up as a teaching, just like someone in ancient times, it seemed to be necessary to become celibate. It seemed to be necessary to not eat anything after noon, just eat until noon and then don't eat anymore. I'm sure there's all kinds of rationales back in those days why that's probably the best way to do that. Everyone had to sew their own robe or have a robe, at least in the Tibetan, or not Tibetan, in the ancient Buddhist tradition. And they all lived together. So there was all kinds of, those are 250 rules for bhikshus, 350, I think, for nuns, because they were seen as some kind of negative factor that they had to have more rules. Probably the other way around might have worked better. But now, the way we do it this way is because it's this culture. There's no reason to make that differentiation. The women are not, at least as far as this situation, insofar as we can, not sidelined. Although I've had people come and just complain about there's not enough women. The women don't are in charge of anything. Well, I think they ought to come here, and especially if it's a woman, they ought to come here and live here for a while, put them in charge of everything. Make them the Sokuzan. Make them the abbot, and I'll just retire. Am I being silly? A little bit, but I'm saying, no, we have to do it situationally. We can't do this overnight. We've only been a monastery for a dozen years or so. Slow, there isn't a monastery like this. Not that we're so wonderful, it's just time that this happened. So ignoring is always going to show up in a way, one way or another, but it's the awareness of the turning away that's important, not never turning away from everything. Situation, however the situation comes up, you just relate to it out as it is, and it might mean that you need to, in order to push on this thing, you may need to ignore this situation over here. More?
Do you mind, how does turning away from everything help us to see more clearly?
You mean as far as strict solitary retreat? Because you're turning away from which you're going to go back in after 10 days. You're turning away from that temporarily. It's just like when you come over here, and a little while ago, you sat over here and faced the wall. I watched you. You sat there for what, 15 minutes, something like that. So you were totally ignoring me, and it pisses me off. When you could have been in there telling me jokes or something or cheering me up because I'm so sad. But no, you had to be in here training your mind. Sound familiar? No, that's because I'm not doing that. No, I encourage you to come in. I don't need to have someone waiting on me hand and foot. So I would say, come here and train your mind. Spend some time, donate some time to that wall. And as you go along, the fundamental vow is to donate your time to saving all beings. People are suffering everywhere. They don't have to go into that. But if there's no way to go in literally that I can see that's showing up particularly where we can just suddenly feed everybody in Gaza, or we can, for that matter, feed everybody, all the homeless people, or give them all housing and feed them all in Battle Creek. We got them right here. But what you can do is you can train the mind that jumps to conclusions, that is manipulative, controlling, and is based on fear. You train that mind so that you can transcend the fear and live out of consciousness only, which is what's going to happen anyway as soon as this body mind passes away. But then you get introduced to the real practice, which is no one's there anymore. Just consciousness. So you're not really, you're doing it because you need to practice. We need to, just like you couldn't do your job if you're trying to do it right now, listen to a Dharma talk, you have to leave your job, punch out or however you do, and come down here and do this just like you can't. I mean, you could sit on in the toilet and eat at the same time, I suppose. But, I just don't want to ignore pooping. So I'm just going to sit on that toilet from now on. Nobody's smiling. Are you guys smiling? Yeah, a few people are. Well, you know what I'm saying? It's a dumb way of saying it, but it's like, no, we move this way, move that. I mean, 10 days in solitary is nothing compared to all the time that you're not in solitary. 4 hours of sitting still and looking at the wall is nothing compared to the other 20 hours that you're, whatever it may be, you're doing this, working at your job, going to the store, coming back, visiting with different people that you run into. And then that 4 hours is not very much, but while you're doing it, it seems like a great deal. And quite often we'll start to talk to ourselves about, I'm wasting my time. I could be doing laundry right now instead of meditating. Meditating feels like a waste of time. That's ego language. And to ego does not want you to see who he is, who she is, who they are. They do not want to be seen. They want to hide out, stay protected, and they'll use anything. Use passion, grasping, struggling, pulling, pushing, blaming, or they'll use aggression, anger, just anger, out and out anger to try to keep that protected, and ignoring, which is the kind of just shutting down. I'm not going to look at that. Quite often that comes out of pride. More?
Geez, I'm thinking of the situation you described where like life sucks so much that we just want to go into retreat and never come out.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering how that kind of desire can be clarity instead of confusion.
You need a teacher. If you do that on your own, then you're what's commonly called a Pratyeka Buddha, that is self-styled. You don't have the teacher there to knock you in the head when you get all tied up in yourself. And are they going to knock you in the head? Probably not. But to point out your insanity in the form of your self-centeredness. It seems to be necessary to have a teacher to do that. They might only have to do it once or twice. If you're a true student, once you're a student, then everything becomes your teacher, as you've heard me say many times. Keep going, just don't give up. It's not a success story. Yes.
Earlier today, at Book City, you said something along the lines of, you can't ever see the ego. And I'm just wondering how we can see through the ego if it's something that we can't see.
Just continue to watch what arises, using the sitting practice of meditation. Watch what is arising without accepting it, without rejecting it, and without ignoring it. Those are the three poisons. And by doing that, you will it'll become more vivid, that part of the consciousness that wants something, and that part of the consciousness that doesn't want something, and that part of the consciousness that wants to distract, turn itself away, or think about something else. That's ego. The consciousness, just pure consciousness, is wisdom. It has no position on anything. It doesn't not care what happens, but it doesn't ignore anything. It's not like a dismissive kind of not caring. It's a fundamental openness that has not gotten rid of anything, has not accomplished anything, but no longer has any position, because it sees through the illusion of locality. It sees through the illusion of locality in space and the locality in time. And it sees through the illusion of a separate being over here, even though there's a form here, and a separate being over there or over here, even though there are forms. And there's a kind of solidity that's very convincing. We use it all the time. Anytime we go anywhere, we're going somewhere. It reinforces the illusion that we are someone going somewhere, getting somewhere. We're late, we're on time, and so on and so forth. We have little stories that are going constantly, one story on top of another story all the time. Do a lot of sitting meditation, those stories start to slow down considerably. They may never go away, but they'll slow way down, and what's left of them will just seem to be seen to be unreal. In other words, there's their whole right and wrong mentality just slides away. It can't find a hook. The way it can find a hook is there needs to be a belief in a separate self that can win, a separate self that can lose, or a separate self that can be seen by others to be mistaken, or seen by others to be embarrassed because of what people think of you, or what people have found out about you, or something. Whole embarrassment is ideas, ego, ego, ego. There is no one. Find out more.
Sanjay, I guess I'm just wondering if there's a point in which you just see the whole outline of the ego.
There's to some extent, yes. You see the structures of it. You see the pushing and the pulling, and the anger that's bubbling around down here, waiting to be triggered. And you sense that there's something under the surface that seems to want out, and sometimes gets out. So it's trying to hide or protect something that is not threatened. What is real, what this is, who you are, can't be threatened by anything, because it's not separate from anything. There has to be something over here threatening that, and that's not true. You're not separate from anything. The most beautiful angel and the homeliest devil, not separate, not the same either. That's why it's so damn difficult, because you can't figure it out, calculate it. More.
When you say, for you, it's like a clown on the roof.
Or
What are you seeing as this clown on the roof, or like how can you tell?
just a pretension, the self-centeredness that's here, that's still here. It's just I just don't believe it. So if you a number of years ago, if you were to come and make fun of me or insult me or saw something I did and mock me or something like that, I could get angry, or the clown would get pissed off. And now, even if the clown gets pissed off, it's unreal. That's why it's so hard. It's because we think, well, if I see what this is, I will no longer be mad. No, you would be completely outraged, throw a tantrum. Not incorrect. There's no way to tell. It's so situational. As soon as you think, well, the clown's on the roof, so I'm probably don't look all that self-centered to others, so maybe I can do what I want and no one will be able to embarrass me. It's a difficult area. More? Yes.
Sokuzan, is there a kind of subtle baseline suffering and craving in the Four Noble Truths that doesn't necessarily have a story, like a target of that craving?
A target?
Well, like wanting something. You talk about it as wanting something else, but is there just a wanting something else that is sort of looking for what that is, that doesn't have a story?
I'm not sure where you're going with that, but either way, I'm going to respond is this way. It's not about not wanting something. It's about the demand. Now, if you suddenly can't get any food, then that wanting food might turn into a demand at some point. You've got to have something to eat, or you're going to starve to death. You've got to have water, or you're going to dehydrate and pass away. So there's a relative situation going on there that we're not trying to shut that out. So you're going to continue to be a living being that appears in this way, you're going to have food and water and shelter and so on. The other areas, you may want to have an enjoyable time going out to dinner, or you may want to be working on any number of things, a project or something. And it's just working with that as it is, rather than making demands about it. Working with others in Sangha is a very revealing area. I'm sure you've noticed. Very easy to get really upset about people that, if you talk to them, they're just trying to be helpful, but they certainly don't act like it. Go ahead.
Sokuzan, maybe another way to ask the question is the cause of suffering that's craving, the cause of suffering in this life. Is that even something we can see in this life, or did that kick off the suffering and we're here, we've been born, and that suffering going to be there?
So it's always about awareness. It's never about accomplishing anything. It's just the awareness, eventually the awareness, the identity that's fighting, you're picking and choosing and pushing and pulling, that is seen through. And the identity of someone else, that's seen through also. There is no other. There's no self. It's non-dual. Subjectivity, objectivity are not two separate things, nor are they the same thing. When that is seen, there may be kinds of karma that are still ramping up in your particular lifetime that may still need to come to some kind of fruition because they started 80 years ago or 1800 years ago. There's no way to, you don't have to be concerned about it because what is going to show up is going to show up because it's dependent. There isn't, it's not about you. It's not about you suddenly being liberated and suddenly nothing bad ever happens. No, terrible things could start happening. You could, just like my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, could, I don't know whether he tried to stop drinking or not, but he sure drank until he just killed himself drinking. What is that about? Are we to blame him for that? Are we to blame him for the people that he accused of abusing them? I don't know. All I know is that if it weren't for him, you would not be listening to anyone here. And I'm only alive because of that Tibetan man. He saved my life by helping me see how I could continue my life without ending it. So I know you're not referring to that area, but that's the area I get into when I say that you don't know. There's no flat description of what this is going to be for you. Go ahead.
Sokuzan, one of the things that comes up on solitary retreat is there's really nothing wrong and nothing to complain about, and I have everything I need, but there's still just baseline dissatisfaction that shows up.
In retreat or out here?
Both.
All right. What's the question?
Out here, I have a lot more stories about it. It looks like the dissatisfaction is the cause of wanting something else. So it seems, I'm just curious, is that a misunderstanding that it looks like that causality is reversed?
Is that what you want to know?
It is.
So would you just satisfy with a yes?
So, well, my question was, what's the misunderstanding? So I'm not satisfied with a yes.
What would you say?
I would say she would not be satisfied with that answer.
How's that?
What is the misunderstanding? That it looks like the suffering is causing the wanting something else?
The basic misunderstanding is that the illusion that there's a separate being, a separate self, that can suffer or not suffer, win or lose, get ahead or fall behind, live or die, all the polarities that it happens to an individual. And it does happen. The dependent origination comes and goes. It's happening everywhere. The sun goes up and goes down, or we go around the sun. I guess that's the way it is. And I know it's a circle. It's what is that called? The sun is analog. Isn't there a song like that? The sun is an analog clock. Was it helpful?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I guess it's time that we stop doing what we're doing. If there's a final question on whatever it is we're looking at here, I'll take it. Otherwise, we can just close. Okay, we'll close.
Hi, my name is Sokuzan, and I'm one of Sokuzan's monks. Sokuzan so freely offers his love to us and his wisdom through these talks and never asks us for anything in return. If you value what he does and what he is and want them to continue, please visit our donate page at SokukoJi.org. Thank you.